right, so we are going to watch the press conference that happened right after the EU NATO leaders summit in London, because I want to hear what he had to say, and I figured you guys would be interested as well. So let's check it out. Without further ado.
Of any government is the security and safety of the British people, to defend the national interest.
Wait, hold on.
Particularly in.
Let me turn this up real quick. Nope, that's not what I want to see. Hold on one sec here.
In these volatile times. That's why last week I announced the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That's also why I met President Trump last week, to strengthen our relationship with America, and indispensable partners in defence and security. And it's why this weekend I've been hosting European leaders here in London to work together for the security of the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Europe as a whole. Through my discussions over recent days,
what's going on, everyone? Welcome in.
We've agreed that the UK, France, and others will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. Then we'll discuss that plan with the United States and take it forward together. The purpose of today's meeting was to unite our partners around this effort, to strengthen Ukraine and to support a just and enduring peace for the good of all of us. Our starting point must be.
So just as a caveat for this, so President Zelensky from Ukraine just came to the White House this past week and had a conference with President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. And it kind of, ended up into kind of they had a little bit of a tiff, and he departed. And then he went on to, I believe, Fox News for an exclusive interview with Bret Baier. Talked a little bit on there, posted a couple videos about that. And then he left to go to London because they were holding a leaders summit for NATO leaders and other European countries in London. And they had that conference and that summit today. And now they are, this press conference is already over. It's already happened. But basically, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, basically gave a press conference after they held the summit to probably discuss some of the things that they talked about in the summit. I'm not here to tell you what to think or tell you my opinion. I just wanted to see what he had to say and hear it out, So this is already, like I said, this has already been played out. So
to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position now, so that they can negotiate.
Appreciate you, Lucky Alien.
From
What's
a
up,
position of strength. And we are doubling down in our support. Yesterday evening,
doubling down in their support.
The UK signed a £2.2 billion loan to provide more military aid to Ukraine.
£2.2 billion.
Not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets.
Okay, so he's saying that they're giving $2.2 billion to Ukraine to help continue to fund what they're doing there, but it's not coming from the taxpayers in Britain. He's saying it's coming from frozen Russian assets, but I don't know. It must be frozen assets that were supposed to go to Russia that British had, or the Brits had control of, I guess. That's what I've heard. I don't know what that looks like or what that means or anything, but that's what he's saying.
And today I'm announcing a new deal, which allows Ukraine to use £1.6 billion of UK export finance to buy more than 5,000 air defence missiles. Which will be
5,000 air defense missiles. So air defense missiles has been one of the big things that the United States has been the biggest donator of up till now. That's a big change because the United States is kind of slowly drawing back on how much aid they're providing, and they're trying to cut back on that to then divert that money and those assets back to the United States. So it sounds to me like the UK is going to start divesting more air defense stuff in response to that to kind of fill the gap.
Creating jobs in our brilliant defence sector. This will be vital for protecting critical infrastructure now and strengthening Ukraine in securing the peace when it comes. Because we have to learn from the mistakes of the past. We cannot accept a weak deal like Minsk, which Russia can breach with ease. Instead, any deal must be backed by strength. Every nation must contribute to that in the best way that it can, bringing different capabilities and support to the table. but all taking responsibility.
Yeah, so Donaria says Russia should pay Ukraine for all the warheads and missiles and bombs handed over, about 2.5 trillion. Yeah, the problem is that, like, who's going to force them to do that? Nobody's going to force them to do that, you know? Like, how are you going to tell them they have to do that and then make sure that, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I get, like, here's the thing. A lot of people want retribution, especially the Ukrainians, and justifiably so, because they've lost so many people, right? But, like, how can you, like, what are you going to do to force Russia to give you a better deal? You know, I just don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think ultimately the United States wants there to be peace and they want the war to end. And I don't know what their plan is as far as like how they're going to achieve that. I do think that I've read some articles where they're talking about, you know, if the Ukraine and the United States sign some sort of a mineral rights deal, that would end up making, you know, and also if the United States was able to broker a truce and a ceasefire and a peace between Russia and Ukraine, and then on top of that, part of that mineral rights deal, sending Americans over there to Ukraine to then extract those, then you'd have Americans in Ukraine doing that stuff, and that would encourage Russia to no longer, you know, do any more further attacks, because then if Russian or if American lives become at risk, or like Americans get their lives taken, then that could be an escalation. And I don't think that Russia wants that any more than America does necessarily. That's just what I've heard. Speculation, of course. Don't know if that's factual or if that's like something that's guaranteed, because there's no such thing as guarantees when it comes to geopolitics and stuff. People can say one thing and then decide, you know what, I'm not going to honor that anymore, and then that's it. But I have heard those takes.
Responsibility to act, all stepping up their own share of the burden. So we agreed some important steps today. First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back.
Hey, Curse.
Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace...
That's a key thing. Europe must do the heavy lifting. What's up, Tex? How's it going? So that's a key thing, right? Like at the end of the day, like regardless of how you feel about it, like I do know that the current administration in the United States wants Europe to take on a larger role in this whole thing and kind of take responsibility for everything that's going on in Europe and European affairs, while the United States focuses on United States affairs back in the homeland, because that's part of the administration's current objectives and goals, is to focus on America first agendas, right? So that's regardless of how you feel about that, or how you feel about the UK or the European Union or the United States, that's what their stance is on it. They want to focus on America and put American things first here in the homeland. And that means kind of pulling back on European affairs and kind of handing the responsibility and the burden of responsibility over to the EU and NATO and the EU nations. That's just based on what I think their aiming is. Now, whether, like, despite whatever you feel about that press conference where Zelensky was in the White House, that's not really important necessarily, but I do think that they are actively trying to take a step back from being involved in European affairs while they continue to try to broker some sort of a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. And it's tough because, you know, obviously it's going to look like they're appeasing Russia if they're just trying to be like, hey, look, what do we need to do to get you to stop this stuff? And I know that, like, a lot of people are like, well, how are you going to, you know, how are you going to broker peace with a nation that doesn't have any desire for it? You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. There's other people that are doing it. There are other people that are much smarter than me that know a lot more about geopolitics than I do that are going to try to figure a way out to do it. But it's, it's tough because I do know that a lot of people are like, well, what happens in Europe is going to affect the United States and this, that, and the other. And I get that too, because like all these countries are so intertwined. But at the end of the day, the point is that the United States is trying to focus on things in America and focus on America agendas that are like pertinent directly here because that's their biggest focus is America stuff. So that's why they're trying to like shift the responsibility over to the EU and NATO and the UK. And it sounds to me like he's in agreement with that he's like trying to, they're going to take the responsibility and take the reins on this thing.
In our continent. And to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace. Yeah. Now we need to deliver together. Finally,
they agree on the fact that it's an urgent peace is important and that they need to find a way to peace. The way that you arrive at that is where they differ, because like the way that the United States believes that they can arrive at peace is going to be different than the way that the European Union and NATO believe that they can arrive at peace. And that's the hard thing, because I do think that most of these folks want to find a solution. They just have different views on how they're going to get to that solution. Brown, appreciate the sub, bro. Thank you. They have different ways of like how they feel like you get from point A to point B, right?
That leaders will meet again very soon to keep the pace behind these actions and to keep working towards this shared plan. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's going to be more. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Russia has nukes, US has nukes, Britain. I mean, everybody's got nukes, man. Nobody wants nukes is like the last thing anyone should want, because we only have one planet, right? And we all share the same planet. And if this planet becomes uninhabitable, then that's bad for everybody. It doesn't matter where your country is. It doesn't matter what country you're from or where you live in. If you make your planet uninhabitable, that's it. That's it. That's the end. So, and regardless of who started it or any of the semantics between like all the stuff that's going on, trust me, I get it. I know like Russia invaded Ukraine. That's a fact, right? There's a lot of stuff that led up to that happening. That's a lot more convoluted and complicated. Not really going to go into detail on that. But at the end of the day, I know that the current administration is like, look, we don't care about any of this, who started what, or how like the things that have happened on both sides. They're like, we just want to find a way to stop this thing. And they're like, we're going to do everything we can to stop it. Very emotional for a lot of people because there's been a lot of death and destruction on all sides. Obviously, Ukrainian people have suffered immensely, and it's been an absolute atrocity. Like hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives, homes destroyed, all this stuff. And they're just trying to figure out a way to end it. And there's no real winners if nukes are used. There's nobody wins if you nuke the planet and then like nobody can live here anymore. I've seen all the videos. Trust me, I've been so immersed in this thing from day one. Been watching everything that's been going on. I mean, I've seen the horrible war atrocities happening in these videos and stuff like that, and like absolute crime, like war crimes. At the end of the day, like, that stuff happened, and are people going to be held accountable? I have my doubts that they're going to be able to find a way to hold people accountable for that stuff. I mean, I would like that, of course, obviously, because there's some bad actors out there that have been doing some horrible things. But, I think that the primary focus is, look, we got to stop this thing now before it escalates anymore. And that's the whole point that the administration is like focused on. I think that doesn't change the fact that the UK and the EU and NATO are going to continue to try to take the reins on this, which is what the United States is hoping they would do, is just like, hey, look, you guys take responsibility for European affairs and, get your stuff in order. And, if you guys want to support them financially, you can. But we are going to take a step back and start focusing on America.
I will now take a number of questions, starting, I think, with you, Beth, at Sky.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Watching President Trump berate a wartime president and defender of European freedom in the Oval Office said to many people what you've already said in a way, that everything has changed. Given that the US has become an unreliable ally, did you as European leaders discuss the prospect of actually going it alone, and actually what the reality of a US pulling out of this, all of this would mean? Do you think you really do need the US? And if you do you think the coalition of the willing will be enough to bring President Trump back around? Thank you.
Well, first, in relation to last Friday, nobody wanted to see what happened last Friday, but I do not accept that the US is an unreliable ally. The US has been a reliable ally to the UK for many, many decades and continues to be. There are no two countries as closely aligned as our two countries, and our defence, our security and intelligence is intertwined in a way no two other countries are. So it's an important...
Yeah, I'm glad that he said that. Like, despite however you may feel about him, like, the US and the UK are the two of the closest allies on the planet. We've been fighting with each other. I mean, obviously, like, we had our tiffs back in the day for the revolution, right? And the War of 1812 and all that. But since then, the UK and the US have been like best friends, like closest allies, fought with each other against common enemies in World War I, World War II, all over Africa, all other types of conflicts all over the planet. I mean, they fought with us in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've been working very closely with them. We train each other. We go to different like training events with each other constantly. We work with each other's militaries very frequently. So I'm glad that he mentioned that, you know, despite that reporter asking him that question or making that statement.
Important and reliable ally for us.
Falklands.
The discussions we've had today, particularly the coalition of the willing, is on the basis that this is a plan that we will work with the US and that it will have US backing. So that is the purpose of the plan, and that is why I spoke to President Trump last night before we developed the work on this plan. Thank you. I've got Robert from ITV.
Hello, Robert Pearson, ITV. I want to sort of put to you what will be on the minds of millions of British people. With your commitment in the event of a peace deal to deploy British soldiers to Ukraine, is there now a more real prospect of Britain being at war with Russia? Can you rule that out?
First off, that reporter, the way that reporter carried himself just then, I was like, why are you standing like that with your hand on your hip, bro? Ooh, that's like, you're talking to the prime minister of your country, bro. He's like holding his phone. He's like got his hand on his hip. Like that's, ooh, man, what a posture to take as you're addressing your prime minister, bro. Read his phone. I don't know if I could do that. Freeze it. Read the phone. What was he looking at? Was he looking at an OF account? I'm just kidding. I don't know. Reporters getting sassy these days. I'm saying that's a very zesty, sassy stance. He's just like, yes, Prime Minister, I'd like to ask you your opinion on the United States and the relationship between the United States and us. Yes? Karen stance. Very British. Oh, man. That's funky.
The whole point of a guarantee for any deal, or if there is a deal, is to preserve the peace. And if you want to preserve the peace, you have to be prepared to defend the peace. So the reason I've been forward-leaning on that
What's up,
is because I want to avoid conflict, because I do not want conflict in Ukraine, in Europe, and certainly not in the United Kingdom. I want stability in the United Kingdom. The way to ensure that stability is to ensure that we are able to defend a deal in Ukraine, because the one thing our history tells us is that if there is conflict in Europe, it will wash up on our shores. And already in the last 3 years, what's happened in Ukraine has had a massive impact on many working people back here in the United Kingdom, because their bills have gone up, their energy bills have gone up. There's been an instability in our economy caused by that conflict. So we are not unaffected by it. And of course, our own security and defence.
See, the whole thing about this, like how he's talking about how it's sooner or later going to wash up on our shores, right? Like, obviously, that's what happened in World War I. Same thing happened in World War II. It started off like, you know, in World War I, it started off pretty far away from them, at least a little ways, and then it kind of spread further west. And then eventually they had to get involved, right? Same thing happened in World War II. And then you had the Blitz and all this other stuff, man. And then they got dragged into it. And they had, I mean, it was like they kind of delayed getting involved for so long. And then it eventually like pulled them into it anyway. The only reason that the U.S. got pulled into World War I was because we were such close allies with the Brits and we felt compelled to do something to help. And then the same thing for World War II. The only reason we got pulled into World War II really was because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. That is literally it. After Pearl Harbor got bombed, it's like, well, I guess we got to do this now, and that was like up until that point, we were supporting them with supplies and maybe finances and stuff, but we didn't actually actively send people. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen here, but I mean, anything's possible if things spread. So yeah, his hair is pretty gray.
Depends on the defence and security of Europe. So every step I am taking is in order to preserve peace, to avoid conflict.
Ladislav, what's up, man?
Because the safety and security.
Appreciate the super chat, bro.
Is my number one duty and responsibility, and I take it very seriously. Yeah,
Ladislav says this world is dirty business. Yeah, sometimes, unfortunately, it is. What's going on, everyone? Welcome in. If you're just joining us, we are just watching a press conference that is being held or was held up in London right after a European leaders summit in London with the president of Ukraine, because they were holding a NATO European Union leaders summit in London today. And that summit is over, and now they're just holding a press conference post the summit. So that's kind of where we're watching. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Chris at the BBC.
Also, Baird, you are that is factual. This is not World War II. Very different than World War II. And that even before that, we were taking a very isolationist approach. But before World War I, we were taking a very isolationist approach before World War II. And I think that the current administration is trying to remove themselves from this as well right now, and kind of like be like, hey, look, you guys handle your stuff, handle your business. We're going to try to broker a peace deal because we want this to end. We want this to stop. We want the death and destruction to end. But in the meantime, they're like, you're going to handle, if you want to give money to them, that's up to you. We're not going to give any more money. We're going to try to cut back on how much we're giving away to people that are not American citizens. And we're going to focus back on America and taking care of Americans and fixing our infrastructure and fixing our power grid and fixing our energy systems and fixing our taxes and fixing our healthcare system and fixing all the stuff here. That's based on what I've seen and been hearing from different people, various places.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. After what happened the other night between Presidents Trump and Zelensky, do you feel a greater personal responsibility alongside President Macron and others for delivering a workable peace? And on the coalition of the willing, as you've described it today, are you persuading more people to join it?
On the question of responsibility, I do think the United Kingdom.
So I like what Memphis Steve said. So if I don't wish anyone ill will, if we don't take care of things at home, we'll be destroyed elsewhere. So it's like, I look at it like this. So if you want to help people, you got to help yourself first. And what I mean by that is like, if your house is in shambles and you're in debt and your personal life is a wreck, it's going to be very difficult for you personally to be able to go do good things to help other people because you're going to be too much of a wreck to be able to do that. And so what I think they're trying to do is like, hey, we need to clean our own house before we can help other people clean their house. I think that's kind of the purpose behind it. And I don't think what that means is that they have ill will towards the European Union or NATO or any of these countries that we're allies with. I think they're just like, hey, look, we got to take care of our own problems right now. We have a lot of problems we got to take care of, and we need to fix that stuff. And if we can fix that stuff, then we can start taking care of other things outside of the nation. But we have a lot of things we got to work on as Americans first. And I think that's why the whole America First movement really started, and probably why the current administration is in power right now. If I had to guess, that's just my assumption. I don't know if that's factual, but that's what I would guess. So pickles are better than cucumbers. Fair point.
should set up a lead. We have done that historically.
Of course, British meme gods.
As a nation, and we need to do it.
Look, here's the thing, man. Like, the way I look at it is like, you gotta think about it in terms of, hey, partisan politics aside, man, like, you have to, like, there's so much information on all sides that are fighting for one perspective or another, and you have to be able to take a step back and dislodge yourself from these echo chambers and just look at like factual things. Like, hey, look, obviously, I think, me personally, like, most Americans want to be able to help people. They want to do good for their neighbors. They want to do good for their friends and family, but they got to take care of their stuff first. And as a nation, it's very difficult to, like, as you get up to like nation level, from like the individual on the ground in a town somewhere, like, there's like 50 layers up to that point. But this is like on a nation scale of, we're going to take care of our crap and fix our crap first, and then we'll start working on other stuff. I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen the USAID stuff getting trimmed and cut, and like all this other stuff getting moved around, and money getting moved around and changing that stuff. But yeah, the Discord link isn't working. Oh, the Discord link is, wait a second. Here, I'll fix. The Discord link is in the Twitch too. So if you want to go over to the Twitch, you can hop in there, and I guarantee that one should work.
Again, and that is why we're moving forward on this. On the coalition of the willing, yes, a number of countries have indicated today that they want to be part of the plan that we are developing. I'll leave them to make their own statements about exactly how they want to make that contribution. But we've been able to move that forward. I accept without criticism and with respect the position of other countries that may not feel that they want to contribute in that way. But I strongly feel that unless some move forward, we will stay in the position we're in and not be able to move forward. And therefore, it is a deliberate plan to ensure that we get some momentum and pace.
What's up, Chaos Time Wizard?
And it is intended to preserve the peace, and it's intended to ensure that we
Dark
stay
Warfare,
in
what's
lockstep
up?
with the United States, which is my strongly held belief the best way to preserve security and defence in Europe and security and defence in the United Kingdom.
Any sense of how many join the coalition?
Well, a number indicated today that they wanted to be part of the more forward-looking element. I will, rather than speak for them in terms of exactly how they'll make that known and what their contribution will be, I'll leave that to them. But I'm pleased that a number did indicate that they do think that this is a plan worth backing and that they want to play a part in it. And so we've made real progress today in the course of the last few hours. Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Alex Wickham from Bloomberg.
Bloomberg, I'm sorry.
On your coalition,
Bloomberg.
do you think it can be bolstered by countries that aren't just in Europe? Essentially, we've got Canada represented here today. Do you think you could get countries beyond Europe to join the coalition of the willing, essentially make it almost a transatlantic partnership? And also, in terms of your plan to present back to Donald Trump, how soon do you need to get that done? Is that something that really needs to happen very quickly in days? Thank you.
On the countries beyond Europe, obviously we had Canada here, who've traditionally taken a forward-leaning role. They've been working very hard with us on issues like training, and they've been a reliable ally. And I'm encouraging of that because they are already deeply vested in Ukraine. As I say, they've worked on the training, amongst other things. Yes, on the question of the US, look, I spoke to President Trump last night. I'm not going to go through the details of that conversation, but I would not be taking this step down this road if I didn't think that it was something that would yield a positive outcome in terms of ensuring that we move together, Ukraine, Europe, the UK and the US.
Make sure to drink water. I appreciate that, Game Central. Thank you.
Lasting peace. And so that's the way I've approached this in the last few days. Hugo, from the iNews.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Hugo Jai from the iPaper.
Marcus, appreciate you,
obviously,
man.
the other party that would need to sign up to any future peace deal is Russia. President
Thanks
Trump
for the
has
super
said he
chat,
wants to
Marcus.
talk to Russia.
Appreciate you, brother.
You're coming up with a peace deal without Russia's involvement. What makes you think that Russia can
I'll
be
have some milk.
persuaded to sign up to this deal that's been agreed by its enemies?
Well, in the end, the deal will have to...
Coco Witch, what's
Of course
up?
it will. But we
Welcome
can't
in.
approach this on the basis that Russia dictates the terms. of any security guarantee before we've even got to a deal. Otherwise,
Security
we
guarantees.
won't make any progress at all.
Yeah, the security guarantees was the thing that President Zelensky was mentioning the most in that meeting that he had in the White House, because he wanted to have some sort of security guarantees that, hey, look, if we give up all this stuff and we relinquish all this control over like what happens to make the peace happen, then we just want to have some sort of guarantee that we're going to be safe and that Russia's not going to completely come in and take us completely over and take over everything in the country. And I get that, I understand, like, they don't, they want some sort of like protection guarantees. Like, hey, if we're going to sacrifice all these things, they want some security guarantees. Right. And they talk about that here too, quite a bit. The second witch follower today. There's quite a few. Yeah. I'll never get tired of the original victory music. Yeah. One of my favorites. Can't have Russian going back on their word now. Yeah. That's the problem, man. It's like, how do you hold them to it? Open Bar Gaming. What's up, dude? Welcome in. His idea of security guarantees is continuous monetary support. That's possible. I don't know what his idea of it is, but it's possible that there are some people that feel like that's what security guarantees means, and that's not what it should mean. I don't know how they're going to figure this out, because like that's a big deal. I don't think anybody's going to get everything that they want. Yeah. UMOA, what's up, man? Guarantee means boots on the ground. Yeah, we don't want that either, We definitely don't want that either. Michael Roach, appreciate the super chat, brother. Appreciate that. Enjoy the live news and reporting. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm trying to put stuff out there. And this just happened today. This is just a pretty recent thing. So anyway,
it is.
Hello, everybody.
For a deal to be done, but if a deal is done, it has to be a deal that is then defended, because what we've seen in the past is.
Yeah, let's see. Here's Donaria. Russia broke 25 ceasefires with Ukraine over 10 years. They'll do it again. Yeah, and that's the hard thing, man. Like there's been a lot of weird stuff going on too. Like, yes, they've broken some ceasefires and they've broken some peace treaties. There's been a lot of weird stuff going on over the past like 10 years as well. Just with. And that's something I don't even know enough about to get into the weeds on. I mean, there's been stuff going on since 2014, since they like kicked out the guy that was like the Russian plant president that was there and everything. And it's just such a complicated political history. I mean, Kiev used to be the capital of the Soviet Union at one point. And so it is just like, it is just so tough, man. It is such a tough situation. And a lot of they speak very similar language. Culturally, there's a lot of big differences between Russians and Ukrainians. And I get why the Ukrainians don't trust the Russians. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why they shouldn't, Crazy Monkey, what's up, dude? And I get it. It's frustrating. That's the tough thing. It's because like at the end of the day, we all want peace. We want there to be a peace. We want there to be like a lasting peace that Russia's not going to violate. And it's tough. Like, how do you negotiate on peace with people that you don't necessarily know you can trust won't violate it? That's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to do. So I don't know the right answer for that. I'm hoping that they can just put things in place. Jello Butter, what's up, man? I'm hoping they can put some things in place that are like contingencies that are like, hey, this will encourage the Russians to stick to that plan. Because you can't force them to do something, because they're just going to be like, no. It's like if you got a kid that's a bad behaving kid, you can't force them to do something. They're just going to want to rebel even harder, right? So you just have to put contingencies in place that encourage them to make that decision or arrive at that decision on their own. But I don't know what that looks like. You know what I mean? That's a tough thing to do, because the U.S. is trying to normalize relationships or relations with Russia again. I think from what I've been seeing, because they would like to be able to like actually practice some sort of diplomacy with this country rather than being completely cut off and not discussing everything, because that's not productive either. But at the same time, like while maintaining their guard up so that way they're not like taking advantage. And I don't know how you're going to do that. That's a very complicated situation, so.
A cessation of the hostilities without any backup, and that was readily breached by Russia. And that is precisely the situation that I think we need to avoid this time around, which is why we're going down this road. Antonello, please, from La Repubblica.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio Guerra from La Repubblica. The Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who you had a bilateral meeting earlier today, said that the West must not split on Ukraine. How can you try to convince Meloni and other European leaders that your plan and your coalition of the willing, is the right thing, and to persuade them to join? And do you fear that the West might split on this? Thank you.
Well, firstly, I had a very good bilateral meeting with Georgia this morning. We had the first bilateral brunch, I think, in the history of British-Italian relations. So that was a first. We get on personally very well. And she's very clear, I don't want to speak for her, but I think her position is well known, that Europe and the US have to stand together, and that bond must always be strong. So there's a huge amount of common ground between the way I see this and the way Georgia sees this, particularly the view that it is important for the security and defence of Italy, of Europe and the United Kingdom, that we work, as we've always worked, closely aligned with the United States. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Is that it? No, the stream's now ended. Well, yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. It is a tough situation.